third row back to start with, and then there's somebody behind and there's somebody over here.
Hi, it's Graham Willis from CPRE. Climate Change Committee has recommended I think 10% of UK land would be covered by agroforestry, which is great that there's something to work towards. I just wonder what you would need as farmers to cover the costs of doing that, because you talk really beautifully and eloquently about the benefits, but the costs clearly will be something on many people's minds.
Who would like to, well, Tim, do you want to have a go at that first? Just from a farmer point of view, what do you want?
Tim 2. So,
Tim 2, yes.
Yeah, there is certainly a cost. I think the Woodland Trust have been very helpful in covering the cost of the trees. And the willows, I've actually, any that are missing in the rows of trees, I just simply take the cutting off. We've got our own propagating tree there ready to plant. The cost is mainly the fencing, and we've tried to simplify that as much as we possibly can with just a single electric wire all the way around. We've learned that we can put it at a certain distance too close and they'll take the tree out and damage the tree, and we move them back and forth as required.
Okay. Lindsay or Tim? Lindsay, do you want to?
Is this working?
Should be.
I think it's also important to think about it in terms of savings as well, not just necessarily the cost of putting the trees in, but once they're established, the savings that you get from sheltering and shading your animals. I often repeat the amount of money that America is losing in terms of heat loss. Overheating of animals, and we're talking something in the region of $900 million every year for dairy cows, and around about $400 million every year. That's a huge amount of money that's being wasted. So I think, the one can potentially offset the other.
Tim?
I mean, I think it's, in my experience, it's fencing, which is the big initial cost, and I echo exactly what Lindsay says. We have to take the long-term view with trees. That's the trick with trees. It's a long-term investment, and you need to. What we know, even thinking about water management, you start to see the roots of trees providing benefits within 2 years of establishment. In relation to the mycorrhizal associations with climate change, the root systems of trees are able to access nutrients that we can't get. So there are all sorts of different ways that trees can feed into those systems, and we do have to think of creative ways to overcome those initial capital costs.
Thank you. That's important, isn't it? I think as the various different country governments are designing new environmental land management schemes, that anything related to trees, that initial capital cost is a significant barrier if we're not careful. There's another question in the front here. You're going to have to perhaps keep your hands up so I can keep knowing everybody is within reason. If you could just say who you are and who you're representing.
Hello, my name is Miles King from People Need Nature. On the fencing point, and also on your point about the lost generation, historically Woodpasture didn't need fencing because the trees were pollarded at a height above which grazing animals couldn't reach. Do you see that as an option for avoiding the need for expensive fencing, which, as we all know, doesn't last anywhere near as long as it used to? And also, could that not create the pollards of the future? These are the trees with the most wildlife. In fact, they're some of the most wildlife-rich things we have in Britain. So we need to be creating new, sorry, I've turned it into a brand. We need to be creating new pollards because the old ones are dying. Thank you.
Lindsay,
Just one comment really about, no, the established trees on Woodpasture didn't need fencing, but the coppice trees did. So you would generally have them fenced off for up to 9 years before the animals were then allowed back in to graze.
Tim, did you want to?
Yeah, certainly the visitors we've had recently have all mentioned pollarding 5-6 feet high, and it seems to me to be a really good idea. Mechanically and practically, how we do it, I don't want to be running along with a chainsaw at 5 or 6 feet high. I think it needs to be something you can just do once a year, and then it'll allow the tree to protect or to be protected lower down. One thing I didn't mention, we've recycled silage, plastic inner tubes, the very, very thick ones, as protection to the willow tree bases, because I think if those get trodden on, if we do ultimately take the fences away, that will provide them with a good deal of protection. It won't quite be pollarding, but it will work to protect the root.
Is there anybody in the audience who would like to add to that, answer that question? With any experience? Jen?
I find that if you cut the branches, they can get faster and eat more of it when they actually browse it. I'm not sure whether it's because it alters the state of the willow or hazel or whatever, or whether it's actually, it's more accessible. I'm not sure really.
Does anybody have any?
Can I just clarify, was that dried or fresh? Or wilted?
Fresh.
Very fresh or wilted?
So basically, cut it and then eat it the next day.
Well, then it would be wilted, in which case the level of tannins is reduced quite substantially, so the palatability would be higher, or the tastiness of it would be higher. So yes, it's unsurprising in that sense that they would be eating more.
That's what I assume, though, thank you.
Yeah, and of course there is an ease of access aspect to it as well.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, he's got a response. Sorry, can you respond to that?
The other question was to Tim Warren. Why did you use a foreign sheep here thing rather than a native sheep? So why a hybrid foreign sheep?
I can easily answer that question because I wasn't directly involved in the experiment and I can't tell you. But I think, more interesting for us is just what we wanted to do was have a look to see whether there was a difference between breeds. I suspect at that time we were working with a willing farmer and using what the willing farmer had.
Okay, there's a question here in the front. This gentleman here has been having his hand up from the beginning. And there's a lady over there. And somebody else at the back. So.
Dave Matthews, smallholder from Stroud. Very interested in the hypothesis around tannins and their impact on methane generating gut flora. Just wondered if you'd done any further experimentation on that to see whether it's actually something that we could use in reducing methane.
Tim, do you want to...
I put it up there because I also think that's a really interesting finding. That was initial work at the tail end of a project. We're now just looking for resources to do more work on that. So unfortunately at this moment in time there's no active work going on that, but we're looking for funding to continue that work.
Lindsay?
Yeah, I do know of one other experiment which looked at alfalfa and willow, comparing the methane from that, and it's half from the willow compared to the alfalfa.
Okay, there's a lady over here with the blue dress.
Oh, it was one paper, but I can't remember who. Not off the top of my head.
So just a quick question. On Tim 1, practical level, any ideas on harvesting as opposed to going picking leaves by hands in a bucket? Have anyone got any good ideas on, have you started thinking? And question number 2, is anyone from Natural England in the room? Quite interested to hear what their response is to the appetite for it.
Okay, I think there's a gentleman at the back there. Are you from Natural England? Yeah, okay, so we'll get to... do you want to go first or run away?
Well, I had a question first of all.
Okay.
Was there any effect on BPS payments through putting trees in?
From a farmer's perspective, not if you keep it below 150 trees per hectare, and I spoke to them at length while we were contemplating and looking at planting, and they didn't really understand what agroforestry was. This would be back in 2013, I think we've recently had part of the Elms new initiation team visit the farm, and they were fascinated by them and trying to work out how we integrate them into the next level payment schemes. And I just wanted to make them aware of the benefits, but also some of the costs involved with planting them on farm and putting them in the right place, really.
Okay, so we need to go back to your original two questions. So there was the practical one, and then there was the one about... So who wants to go first on the ideas with practicalities? Nigel?
Yeah, because the buckets are mentioned, which was me, not a Tim. There's too many Tims around. The buckets are as much control, but as I was saying, whether we're dropping branches from pollards, whether we're making living hedges, living fences, there's so many options of what we can do, and especially with willow, which seems to be just a tree that we seem to just do it going anyway. Sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry. Can we have the...
If you're literally throwing branches in, do they need to be fully dried or completely fresh, or is there a sort of sliding scale, but does it incur scouring or any other problems?
It's really on the stuff we were doing. We were feeding them from the buckets. It was feeding, and it would have been pulled in the morning, fed. So, I'm not sure we didn't do the time of feeding. So whether they ate more as they wilted and the tannins came back off, or whether it came initially. But to a certain extent, it doesn't matter if you're chucking a branch and you leave it till it goes. So it doesn't matter whether they take it fresh or they take it 12 hours later, 24 hours later as it's wilted. Practically, that doesn't matter too much, does it really?
Lindsay, do you have any experience from doing feeding in situ?
No, I mean, there are different management practices. So feeding in situ usually means, so if you're cutting and dropping fresh, it usually means that because there isn't enough grass in current systems. So we're talking about Mediterranean systems or New Zealand, Australia. So it's usually really a practical tool rather than an alternative decision, if you like. If we're talking about dried tree hay or tree silage, then it's for winter feeding. Also when the grass isn't there, but for a different management practice. What we know is that if you ensile tree fodder, then you maintain a level of tannins. If you make tree hay, then it will go down.
Okay, I'm slightly conscious we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left. So there's a gentleman there and there's several people over there. So we can have very short, sharp questions and short, sharp answers.
I'm William McAlpine from Robinson Research, and I manage the UK National Willow Collection, which has got 1,500 different types of willow in it. I was interested in not what willow species Nigel used in his study, and just wanted to kind of point out that amazing diversity that's there.
Right, thank you. There's several people over there, so gentlemen with the glasses first, then one in front, one in the back.
Yeah, to Alistair Trickett, farmer, to Tim, 2 down. Could you just talk about your grazing regime? Are you using rotational grazing with like paddock grazing with electric fencing, and also the sward that they're grazing? Because one of the pictures looked like it had some chicory or lucerne or something in it.
Yes, we've very much been bitten by the herbal bug and mixed pastures, as many species as we can put in. So rotational grazing, 25-day rotations, measuring grass weekly, so aiming at between 10 and 12 tonnes of dry matter per hectare production per year, and just this is another string to the bow to try and look at increasing the health of the animals within the system, really. So it fits in and it ticks a really nice box for improving animal health.
Okay, thank you. We've got time for 2 more quick questions.
John Crisp, Wave Hill Farm. Just a question for Nigel. Cobalt being more available in moister soils, surely were the willows growing in those damper soils than the other trees? Could that have been a reason why there were higher levels of cobalt in the willow?
Not really, because certainly in some of the earlier stuff, the trees were close together. In that, the willows there are papers showing that willows do preferentially take up some of the two valency metals, which includes the cobalt, the zinc, and also things like cadmium as well. And also is including, as we said, that the calcium is slightly higher. So there are mechanisms why willows are higher.
Probably got one more question, yeah.
Hello there, Kit Vaughan, Prime Coppice, Woodland in Dorset. Most farmers tend to have a store of woodlands anyhow. They're called hedges. They're just not managed for woodlands. And I wonder what the implications of your work for better management of hedges, because that could have a very immediate, quick effect. The second thing is we've got 50% of English woodlands are unmanaged or not managed, and often have stock going through them in a very bad way. But there's also a schism in the policy field and in the farming field between woodland managers and land managers as sort of dairy farmers, etc., managers. So what options are there to kind of reintegrate, using this finding, the work between woodland owners and other more extensive land managers? Thank you.
We've got 1 minute left, so very quick answers, please. Who wants to go first?
That wasn't a 1 minute question. I think it's, woodland grazing is a really interesting area. Again, it's a traditional practice. It's something that needs to be done carefully, and with particularly depending on which stock you want to put into those woodlands. A pig can do quite a lot of damage quite quickly if it's not managed carefully, but it can also provide a lot of benefits. We are starting to see better policy around farm woodlands, particularly in Scotland, in relation to grazing and grazing management. I think it's farm woodlands themselves are a particularly under-researched resource, and I think that's something that we need to re-engage with, thinking about the farm woodland systems and the roles they can and potentially should be playing.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our speakers very much for their presentations. I hope you found it interesting. There's